This is the story of a guy named Mark. I'm going to tell you everything just the way it happened, and once you hear it, you'll never look at basements the same way again. Mark had just moved into a new house. It wasn't a fancy one, just an old, quiet place on the edge of town. It was the kind of house you pass by and don't think twice about. The walls had cracks, the paint was chipped, and the wooden floors creaked no matter where you stepped. But it had something that made Mark feel uneasy right from the start: the basement. The basement door was plain, just like any other door in the house, but every time Mark walked past it, he felt this strange chill run down his spine. He couldn't explain it. It wasn't cold, not really, but something about that door made him feel watched. Like there were eyes behind it waiting. He laughed it off at first. Told himself it was just the idea of a new place playing tricks on him. But that feeling didn't go away. It got stronger. The first real sign something was wrong happened late one evening. Mark was unpacking boxes in the living room, trying to make the place feel like home. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then he heard it. A sound, faint and soft, coming from the basement. It wasn't loud. Just a whisper. Almost like someone was saying something, but he couldn't make out the words. He stopped, held his breath, and listened. Nothing. The sound was gone. Mark shook his head and told himself it was the house settling, or maybe wind outside. He went back to unpacking, but he couldn't shake that weird feeling anymore. That night, while lying in bed, the whisper came again. This time it was clearer. A voice. Not loud, not angry, just there. Like someone talking through the walls, soft and calm, but still terrifying. Mark sat up, heart pounding in his chest. He looked around, his ears trying to catch it again. Silence. He grabbed a flashlight from his bedside drawer. He told himself he just wanted to check it out, just for peace of mind. But deep down, he knew something was waiting. He walked slowly through the hallway, every step echoing a little louder than it should have. The flashlight shook slightly in his hand. He was getting closer to the basement door. When he reached it, he paused. He stood there, staring at the handle. He could feel the air around it. It was colder than the rest of the house, like a fridge door had been left open. He didn't hear the whisper anymore, but something told him that if he opened the door, he'd find something he wouldn't be able to forget. His hand moved to the knob, almost like it had a mind of its own. He gripped it tightly, heart beating faster with each second. His ears were straining for any sound, any noise from down below, but there was nothing, just silence. The kind of silence that hurts your ears because it's too deep, too empty. He was sweating now, but it wasn't from heat. Something deep inside told him this wasn't just a basement. There was something more down there, something wrong, something waiting. That's where it all began. Mark, standing at the basement door, not knowing that his life was about to change forever. Mark stood there, frozen, with his hand on the doorknob. He wasn't sure why he couldn't move. It was like the air around the door had a hold on him, like something was silently daring him to come down. He stared at the old wooden door, worn from years of use, with tiny scratch marks near the bottom. Maybe they were made by a dog or a cat from the previous owner. But somehow they didn't look like normal scratch marks. They were too deep, too long. He took a deep breath, turned the knob slowly, and pulled the door open. The hinges creaked, groaning like they hadn't been used in a long time. The cold air hit him first. It wasn't the kind of chill you get from a breeze. This cold felt like it came from under the ground, like something had been frozen down there for years. He pointed his flashlight into the darkness. The beam cut through the air, showing a long wooden staircase, narrow and steep. Dust floated in the light like little ghosts. Each step creaked loudly as Mark descended. It felt like the basement was swallowing him one step at a time. He had to crouch slightly, the ceiling too low for comfort. The walls were made of old stone, damp and cracked, with water stains that looked like they had been there for decades. The deeper he went, the more he noticed the smell, musty, like wet earth and something rotting. He reached the bottom and stepped onto the cold cement floor. His flashlight flickered slightly, the weak light barely showing what was ahead. Boxes were stacked in the corners, old furniture covered with white sheets, and a few rusted tools hanging on the far wall. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Mark stood there for a moment, scanning the room, his flashlight moving slowly from one side to the other. And then he heard it again, the whisper. This time it was clearer. A voice. It came from the far corner of the room, where the light didn't quite reach. It wasn't just a sound, it was words. They were faint, but he could just make them out. "Come closer, help me." His heart dropped. He pointed the flashlight toward the voice, stepping forward. The light shook in his hand as he walked slowly. His legs felt heavy, like they didn't want to move, but something inside pushed him on. Then, in the far corner, he saw it. A figure. At first, he thought it was just a pile of cloth or maybe an old statue covered in a sheet. But as he moved closer, the shape became clearer. It was a person, hunched over, sitting on the ground, facing the wall. "Hello?" Mark called out, but his voice sounded small, afraid. The figure didn't move. He took another step, shining the light right at it, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The figure had no color in its skin. It was pale, sickly, almost gray. Its body was thin, too thin, like it hadn't eaten in years. Its back was to him, but then slowly it turned its head. Mark gasped and took a step back. The face was hollow, eyes wide open but empty, as if they weren't eyes at all. Just black holes. The mouth was slightly open, and a faint breath came out, like it was still alive, but barely. And then everything stopped. The whispering stopped. The figure didn't move. The room fell into a deep, heavy silence. Mark's hand tightened around the flashlight, and he wanted to run, to get out, but he couldn't. Something about those empty eyes held him in place, like they were pulling him in. The basement no longer felt like part of the house. It felt like a different world, a darker one, and Mark had just stepped into it. Mark was frozen. He stood there in that dark basement, barely breathing. The thing in the corner, whatever it was, had turned its head toward him, and those empty, black eyes stared right into his soul. He couldn't explain the feeling, but it was like time had stopped. Like the air around him had turned into something thick, something heavy, pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. The flashlight in his hand flickered once, then again. He shook it, trying to keep the beam steady, but deep down he knew it wouldn't last. The figure didn't move again, but somehow that was worse. It just sat there, lifeless but watching. Mark's skin crawled, and a cold sweat covered his forehead. Every instinct told him to run, but his feet wouldn't move. It was like they were glued to the floor. Then from behind him, the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Mark jumped, spinning around, the flashlight swinging wildly in his hand. The sound echoed through the stone walls like a thunderclap. He looked back up the stairs, but it was pitch black. The door was gone. The light from the house above had vanished. There was nothing but darkness behind him now. He turned back toward the figure, and that's when he heard it again. The voice. The whisper. But this time it was louder and closer, much closer. "Get out, get out." It wasn't just in the corner now. It was all around him. The voice was everywhere, surrounding him, like it was in the walls, in the floor, even in his head. Mark's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He tried to move, but his body still wouldn't listen. His arms felt weak, like they weren't even his anymore. He backed away slowly, his eyes locked on the figure. But then, something changed. The figure began to move. Not like a person should move. Its arms and legs bent in strange, stiff angles, cracking with each motion. It rose to its feet, standing taller than Mark expected, and then slowly it started walking toward him. Mark stepped back again, bumping into an old wooden table. The sound made him flinch. His breathing was fast and shallow. The figure didn't speak, didn't rush. It just kept walking, step by slow step, its hollow eyes never leaving his face. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered violently, and then went out. Darkness swallowed him. He couldn't see a thing. He couldn't hear the footsteps anymore either. But he could feel something. Something was near him now, right beside him. Then the voice came again, but this time it wasn't a whisper. It was a hiss, a breath right in his ear. "You shouldn't be here." Mark spun around, swinging the flashlight like a weapon, but it didn't hit anything. He ran, stumbling in the dark, arms out in front of him, trying to find the stairs, the wall, anything. He crashed into a box, sending tools and metal clattering across the floor. The noise was deafening in the silence. He crouched down, trying to catch his breath, heart thudding like a drum. The whispering had started again, softer this time, almost like laughter. Mark realized then he wasn't alone in the basement. The figure wasn't the only one down there. He could feel other things moving in the shadows, watching him, surrounding him. And then, as he looked up into the darkness, he saw something that made his blood freeze. Two more sets of glowing eyes opened in the far corner. Then a third, then a fourth. He wasn't in a basement anymore, he was in their world now. Mark's breath came in short, panicked gasps. His eyes darted around the dark basement, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, or rather what he couldn't see. The only thing he could clearly remember was those eyes. Not just one pair, but many. Glowing faintly in the darkness, scattered across the room like stars in a night sky, watching him. Waiting. He tried to crawl backward, hands scraping across the cold cement floor. His fingers touched something soft and wet, and he yanked them away, not even wanting to know what it was. The whispering hadn't stopped. It had become a low chant now, like 100 voices speaking all at once in a language he couldn't understand. But it wasn't just sound anymore. It felt like the voices were inside his head, crawling under his skin, trying to take hold of his mind. Then it happened. A cold, bony hand grabbed his ankle. Mark screamed and kicked with everything he had. His foot connected with something that made a sickening crack, and the grip loosened just enough for him to pull away. He scrambled to his feet and ran toward where he thought the stairs were. He couldn't see anything, but his body was running on pure instinct now. He slammed into something metal, an old water heater maybe, but didn't stop. He had to find the stairs. He had to get out. And then finally, his hand hit something wooden. A step, he nearly cried with relief. He dropped to his hands and knees and started climbing up, one stair at a time. But before he could get halfway, another hand reached out from the darkness and grabbed his wrist. This one was stronger. No, he whispered to himself, pulling hard, but the grip was like iron. Another hand grabbed his shirt. Then another. They were pulling him down, dragging him back toward the basement floor. His flashlight, still in his other hand, flickered weakly, just enough to give him a glimpse. He saw their faces. Some were missing eyes. Others had mouths that stretched open far too wide. Their skin was torn and dry like old paper. They didn't speak. They just stared at him with faces that looked like they had been stuck in silent screams for years. One of them tilted its head, and Mark saw that it had no lower jaw at all, just a black, open hole where a mouth should be. He screamed and kicked again, using all his strength to break free. One hand slipped, then another. He lunged upward, grabbed the edge of the doorway at the top of the stairs, and pulled himself out with a force he didn't know he had. As soon as he was out, he slammed the basement door shut behind him and collapsed against it, gasping for air. But it wasn't over, because as he sat there, trying to calm his breathing, he heard them. The whispers were still there, just behind the door. And they were getting louder. Then came the knock. Not a loud one. Just 3 soft, slow knocks. Like a polite warning. Mark backed away from the door, crawling backward on the floor. He looked up and saw something that made his blood go cold again. At the top of the stairs inside the house, there was someone standing there. Another figure. Taller, still, just watching him. Mark didn't know what it was or how long it had been there, but its presence filled the room like a storm cloud. The whispers in the basement quieted instantly, like even they were afraid of the figure at the top of the stairs. He blinked, and it was gone. He didn't know if he was losing his mind or if something even worse was happening. All he knew was that he wasn't alone. Not in the basement. Not in the house. Not anymore. Mark didn't sleep that night. He didn't even close his eyes. He sat in the corner of his bedroom, knees pulled up to his chest, a baseball bat in one hand and the broken flashlight in the other. The house was silent again, but it was the kind of silence that made your ears ring. A heavy, watching silence. Every creak in the walls made him flinch. Every shadow in the hallway looked like something was hiding inside it. And the worst part, that basement door, he could see it clearly from where he sat, just down the hallway. It was shut but not locked. He had tried to push a chair against it, but the chair moved on its own not long after. He didn't touch it. It just slid away, like the house didn't want him to lock the basement. By morning he was pale and shaking. He knew he couldn't stay there another night. He had to leave. So he grabbed his backpack, shoved some clothes and his phone charger into it, and headed for the front door. but the door wouldn't open. The knob turned, but it was stuck. He pulled harder. Nothing. He tried the windows. Nailed shut. Every single one. It was like the house had sealed itself. That's when he started to hear the breathing again. Slow. Deep. Not his. It came from behind him, from the hallway. Mark turned around and saw nothing. But he could feel something there. A pressure in the air, like someone standing too close to you without touching. He backed away slowly, but the breathing followed him. He ran upstairs to the second floor, hoping he could find another way out, but every room was the same. Locked windows, stuck doors, and that feeling, that heavy, awful feeling that something was walking just behind him, always one step out of sight. When he entered the last room at the end of the hallway, what used to be the guest bedroom, he found something new, something that hadn't been there before. Carvings. All over the walls, in the wood, in the floor, even the ceiling. Symbols. Circles. Eyes. All scratched in with something sharp. Some looked fresh. The strangest part? They were warm. When he ran his fingers over them, they felt like they were pulsing. Like they were alive. And in the center of the room, in the middle of all those symbols, was a mirror. But it wasn't his mirror. This one was tall, old, covered in a black wooden frame carved with more symbols. He didn't own this. He'd never seen it before. And yet there it was, standing right in front of him. He stepped closer. Slowly. The surface of the mirror was cloudy, like someone had breathed on it. But as he stared, the fog cleared, and he didn't see his reflection. He saw the basement. Not how it looked now, but how it looked years ago. Cleaner. Bright. A man was down there digging, and beside him, something dark was watching. The thing didn't have a face, just a shape. A shadow. But its presence filled the room even through the mirror. Then the man in the mirror looked up, not at the shadow. At Mark. He pointed and his mouth moved. Mark couldn't hear the words, but he could read them. You let it out. The mirror shattered. Mark jumped back as shards of glass flew across the room, cutting his arm. Blood dripped down to the floor and touched one of the carved symbols. It lit up, glowing red like fire beneath the wood. The house shook. The whispering returned, louder than ever. And this time it spoke clearly. We're here now. Mark was no longer just trapped in the house. He had become part of it,